Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this, our latest Property4Media webinar. It's great to have you all here with us today. We've got a fantastic turnout to listen to today's topic, which is, what do property freelancers want? And as I say, we've got an amazing crowd joining us. And I think that's because we've got an A-star championship list of the very top property freelancers in the UK. And I'm very grateful that they could join us today. I'm going to introduce them now so they can give you a wave. Then I'll just give you a few notes about today, talk you through it, and then we'll get going. So we've got joining us in alphabetical order, Andrea Dean. Hi, Andrea, great to have you here. We've got Hugo Cox. Morning, Hugo. We've got Jayne Dowle. Hi, Jayne, joining us from Yorkshire. And we've got Zoe Darehall.
Hello.
Hi, Zoe, great to have you here. So this is the latest professional development webinar from Property4Media, and today we're going to look at how can property PRs work with freelancers most effectively, both in the current climate of COVID and the impositions that places on our lives, and also in the longer term. We're going to look at what our all-star panel are receptive to at the moment in terms of ideas, what works, what doesn't work. We'll also look at kind of mistakes that property PRs can sometimes make in approaching freelance journalists. Equally, we'll look at how giving a story to a property journalist may end up giving you a better return in the long term, exponential returns, because if they like your story, they may champion it and take it forward into different publications and in different ways in the fullness of time. Before we get cracking, if you're feeling social, we'd love some comments on Twitter. We love those Instagram stories. So it's hashtag Property4Media Meets. We're at Property4Media. Please share your thoughts and your feedback if you enjoyed the session, that is. Otherwise, just keep quiet about it. That would be the best thing. We've had well over 100 registrations today from companies including Knight Frank and Zoopla and Stratton Parker and lots of the big property PR practices such as FTI and FOR and Building Relations, Laurie Cornish, and so many more. So thank you everyone for coming and joining the crowd this morning. It's great to have you here in this virtual world. Okay, so the way that today will shape up is each of our four property freelancers are going to just tell you a little bit about themselves, the titles they work for, what piques their interest, what they love, what is never going to work with them, and how they work most effectively with PR professionals. And Andrea Dean has offered to go first. Andrea is, just let me say one thing before I introduce Andrea. Do post some questions on Zoom's Q&A functionality. I'm just going to give you that thought now. Zoom tells us your name, but just put in your company name at the end of your question. That would be great because we don't always get that, just in case I don't know you. Okay, back to Andrea. So Andrea has had over 20 years experience as a freelance journalist. She specialized in UK property, home improvements, interiors. She loves the part of her job that gives her that sneak peek into millionaires' houses. And it's just sad that this year there's been a little bit less of that, but let's hope those days soon return. Her work appears in dozens of newspapers and magazines. She's perhaps best known for her work for the Metro, writing their weekly property supplement. Her remit includes first-time buyer and home mover case studies, new builds, area focuses, and more. She also contributes to Your Home magazine and occasionally to Living Etc., to Real Homes and Lifestyle. And she also works on corporate work for clients in the property sector. Andrea, it's lovely to have you here with us today. Would you let our audience know a little bit about you and your world and how you bring them into your working life?
Gosh, hello everybody. Yes, first of all, I hope you're all safe and well, and I couldn't do my job without you. It would really be impossible. So thank you for all your help and input all the time, particularly over the last few months. Shall I carry on, Henry?
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
Well, as you know, I do work mainly for Metro, the weekly property supplement, which is published on a Tuesday. And although sort of until quite recently, it was mainly like 90% of it was London South East. I'm also doing a lot more for the regional supplements now, so nationwide and the Scottish edition. And I do a lot of case studies, so thank you for all that you've sent in. I do have a lot in stock, but if I haven't used them, it's because they're just not quite right for what I'm working on at the moment, or I have certain ones like particular Help to Buy outside London, lots of them, and then there are gaps in others. So it would be great if you could continue sending first time buyer, second stepper, occasionally investor case studies through to me, please. What I would like, first of all, a very small point, but it's a deal breaker, surnames, please. If they don't have surnames, people, I just can't, the people included, I just can't, we can't feature them. Also, like really meaty stories, bit of backstory, and a lot more perhaps about the buying process if they've used Help to Buy, shared ownership. I mean, recently I've had a lot of people who document their decorating their house buying journey on Instagram, but they're great. But I think I've had a lot of those. So just different things. Always need the name, good photos, the names of everybody who's in the photos, please. Sometimes I get them with the kids in and the dog, actually. My editor likes the name of dogs, pets, if they're in there. So perhaps with photography, if they don't want the children's names included, don't have the kids in the shot, please. Also handy to know if it's exclusive. I mean, fine if it's been in the broadsheets, we like to know, but not in other London rivals. And I said, great pictures, but no signage, no hard hats, no standing by the developer's board. Okay, so yeah, so that's case study. So particularly need ones outside London at the moment, sorry, in London at the moment, nationwide and Scotland. I've got quite a few in the home counties. Also, I do a lot of new build coverage as well, from first time buyer to ultra luxury. Don't get sent many, that's mainly London South East, don't get sent many developments, top end developments, and I'd like to see more coming through, please. In the days when I was out on the mountain travelling through London a lot, I often used to see developments that I'd never had any details of. Now I'm not out and about quite so much, and I know I miss things, and if you send them in, then I can cover them, but if I don't know about them, I've just got no way of finding out. New developments, new phases, last remaining, but no point really sending details on ones which are sold out, or anything on like staff appointments, so corporate stuff within the companies. And shared ownership, it's very handy, small point, very handy to know if it's part of a larger private built scheme. And with developments also where they are, sometimes if they're quite rural, it's not, my geography is pretty good, but it's not always clear where they are. Yeah, a little bit more. Yes, Metro's obviously changed, the content's changed a bit, I mean, since COVID. Certainly the page numbers are building up, and today's is a very thick supplement. We seem to be doing more supplements, lots of new builds. We're just not really planning ahead as much, or certainly I don't know about it if we are, but certainly so please send lots of new builds, case studies. I do have features in stock, but I don't always know when they're going to go in, and things are moved around an awful lot and at the last minute. And I know lots of you have said, why hasn't this gone in? When's it going in? But you know, honestly, I just don't always know, or I don't know until the day before, or unfortunately, I just don't have time to, you know, to reply to your emails and let you know. Going forward, the neighbourhood watch, the area focuses will return. So please send suggestions through. I already do have some from some of you and really appreciate those. They must be in London or within an hour's commute. Always after really interesting houses, research that I can do like a top 10 theme around. And I think that's really it. Well, sorry, one more point. We transfer links, fine, but please could you send long ones, particularly if you're sending press releases on spec, because I often go to use them and the link's expired, which can be quite frustrating. And please no pics on Google Docs, as Metro's picture team really, they don't get on with them very well. So I think that's it for now. Thank you. Thank you.
That's a wonderful overview, Andrea. Thank you so much. I know I've got some specific questions for you later, so and I'm sure more will come in, but there was so much granular information there. I'm sure our audience would have found that so helpful. That's fantastic. So I'm going to introduce Zoe now, and I'm just going to do a little commercial, if the audience will allow me, at the beginning of that. So Zoe, before I introduce her properly, Zoe Dowle is currently Freelance Property Journalist of the Year in the Property Press Awards. It's a title that seems to change hands pretty much every year. She won it in 2019, and I just want to let the audience know that Property4Media is about to announce the date of the 2020 awards. Needless to say, we plan to hold them at the Museum of London, and we held on. It's going to be virtual, but we're going to make it a special event. And even as I speak, the trophies are being printed somewhere in the UK, and it's an all-new trophy. It's very exciting, and we're working on the show that we're going to create for you that evening. Right, commercial over to Zoe Dowle. Zoe has been a journalist for 25 years and has specialised in property since 2003. From an era of travelling almost continuously and glamorously to see wonderful luxury properties worldwide, she's been doing a little bit more working from home for some reason this year, but I'm sure that lifestyle will soon return. She's known very much as the Telegraph's luxury property expert, and is a regular writer also for titles including London Magazine and Sphere Magazine, which is, I think, currently in hibernation. But she writes for the Sunday Times, Bricks and Mortar, Financial Times, and others. And lockdown has sparked sidelines such as podcasts for Barclays Private Bank and Property4Media. And she's also a content writer for developers, agents, and other property-related companies. So it's great to have you joining us today. Please tell our audience a little bit about your world and how you work with the property PR marketplace.
Right, hi, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd say that being a freelancer, I think it always feels like you're in a bit of a cocoon anyway, and sort of never more so than this year. So I would say that Property4Media is a massive outlet for me to feel that you are kind of keeping in touch with things. As Andrea said, we're just not getting into London in the same way to central London. You're just not seeing things as you're passing. So I do rely very heavily on what comes into me through Property4Media, and I put all my requests on it. So, I mean, you covered the sort of outlets I work for there. So yeah, the Sunday Times, the Times, FT, the Telegraph in sort of in various areas of it. So as you say, Telegraph Luxury, which is the online content, and that was the one channel of mine that didn't collapse during lockdown, so they continued to commission throughout, which was great, when all the others sort of disappeared overnight one day. And then so there's Telegraph Luxury. There's also their luxury magazine, which they've started doing some I just before lockdown started doing some big interviews for, which was a nice new kind of niche really. And so I'm hoping to do more of those. So that really requires big names, big designers, big architects. They need to be pretty household known names, obviously celebrities if they're going to sell something, but I mean that's notoriously hard to pin down. And then the Telegraph's property section on Saturdays, if that sort of re-emerges for freelancers. And then as well as that, the London Magazine, I write their news page every month. And then Sphere Magazine, I've been their property person since it launched about 12 years ago. But again, as you say, they're kind of hibernating right now. So so that's the outlets. I mean, PRs watching this will know as well as I do really what the editors of those sections want. In brief, I'd say Sunday Times are kind of how we're living now, whether it's UK or overseas. It's very much a kind of not super rich, and it's not London centric. It needs to be a sort of, just a real sense of, looking into our lives and lifestyles right now. FT, and I guess it's always useful to have some new data or a new report that shines a spotlight on a certain location. I tend to do their overseas stuff. Clearly the investment perspective is really interesting for them, and they really like local voices. They don't like just hearing from agents based here who are selling property there. You know, they really want the kind of on the ground voices. And then for the Telegraph Luxury, it is how the super rich are living in any kind of sense of that. And it's often inspired by stories that are coming on sort of in American blogs or magazines that we can then kind of look at how that translates to what's happening here. Just to really, I mean, they're fun to do because it's a sort of, you know, really looking into the lives of billionaires. So that's kind of the remit of that lot. In terms of how COVID has changed work this year, I'd say everything I'm writing is COVID related, whether directly or indirectly, but I mean, it just, you know, pretty much everything starts with some acknowledgement of, you know, how everything's changed. So it could be about how the market and buyers are reacting, obviously in this sort of COVID era. It could be how designers are adapting, where we're all now looking to buy, now we're all leaving London, where we're going to spend future lockdowns, you know, how wellness has taken a whole new meaning in properties because of COVID. It comes into everything. So, you know, obviously you just can't not acknowledge it. And I thought I'd come up with a really handy mnemonic for how PRs can help, what makes a difference. So my mnemonic is STEP. So I came up with 4 things: speed, transparency, exclusivity, and personality. So speed, obvious, you know, I mean, actually most of what I'm writing isn't needed the next day, but it's generally pretty helpful if you can get it within a couple of days. And, you know, it's kind of a lot of pieces I do for London Magazine and Telegraph Luxury, I incorporate a lot of different viewpoints. So if you can get your clients' comments in, you know, quickly, and once I've got all the things I need, I then start writing. So even though I might put quite a long deadline on my Property4Media requests, I start writing the minute I think I've actually got everything I want. So best to get it in quickly. So speed, transparency, you know, you can get into situations where you sort of think you've got a story and you have lots of conversations with the PR, and then you find halfway down the line, well, actually, we have already pitched this to all the editors, and you know, and of course, then it's impossible to write because you know that it's already gone out to lots of people and someone else is already doing it. So just be really straight up from the start about, has anyone else got this, and you know, who said no already, and it just saves everyone looking a bit daft. Exclusivity, similar thing really, but I mean, obviously exclusive reports, data, interviews, always great. It needs to be genuinely exclusive. So I think sometimes there's a perception, I know PRs obviously have to get lots of different angles out of one thing. So they might say it's exclusive when they mean actually there's just one fact they're giving you that they didn't give other people, or one photo. But obviously from an editor's perspective, that's just not exclusive. They want the whole thing to be exclusive. And then P, personality. This sort of struck me more recently. I think now that it's so hard to sort of go and see things, or harder, when you actually go and view things in person as a freelancer, I mean, firstly, obviously it's unpaid time, so you know, it's got to be worth it to you to go in and see something, rather than, you know, virtual reality is now so good at virtual viewings are now so sophisticated that, you know, there's got to be a reason why you're going to see it in person rather than able to just look at it online. So I think the personality comes from the person that's showing you around that development. You really want them to bring it to life for you, whether it's the developer or the agent or the architect or designer. You know, they need to be the person that's kind of really, they're really on board with the story you're wanting to write. They know what it is, and they're kind of going to give you all those great sound bites. Otherwise, I mean, I had an experience recently where it kind of felt like the agent showing me was actually a bit of a barrier to the story. They didn't want to really say anything. And I just left thinking, well, I don't know how I can do anything now. And of course, that's just a waste of everyone's time, where they're kind of clearly very reluctant to kind of play it up as a story. It's just like literally showing you what room is what, and you can see that. So that's what I'd say: step, speed, transparency, exclusivity, personality. There we are. That's my my summary.
Terrific, Zoe. And I hope with personality that actually also includes the PR consultant themselves as the first ambassador to take the product to you.
Yeah, exactly. So some are absolutely brilliant at just having, they aren't just sort of blinkered in selling this one development, marketing that one thing. They've got a massively kind of big view of everything that's going on, and they're really able to make connections with things, spot the trends, and contextualize things. And there are definitely loads of PRs that do that. Yeah,
brilliant. PRs who can contextualize things and understand the competitive positioning and
and don't be kind of naive, don't pretend that this is the only one of something, or we all know roughly where things sit. So yeah, exactly, just be honest about what the competitors are, and and what the problems are, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that comes back to transparency as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zoe. Lovely. Jayne Dowle, we'll turn to you. I have this sneaky feeling that during that, Jayne has been making a mnemonic out of the word Yorkshire, but
oh no, I'm not that good.
Jayne, it's lovely to have you with us today, joining us from her home in Yorkshire, where she writes about property. So Jayne was a staffer and an editor at the Times, writing on entertainment. Also worked for Anne Ashworth's team at the Times property team with Anne then, in those days, writing for Bricks and Mortar. She made that decision to move north and has written about property pretty much all the time since, is a regular contributor to Sunday Times Home, to the Times Bricks and Mortar still, House Beautiful, Grand Designs, some wonderful titles. And she covers everything from location reports and market analysis right through to interiors, and a favourite subject of mine, which is gardens and gardening, or gardens. So Jayne, lovely to have you here with us. Tell us about what you love writing about, what your focus is, and how you're working during this difficult year. What kind of stories you're successfully pitching, and how our audience can help you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for having me today, Henry. Hello, everybody. I've not met most of the people that I'm talking to today, which is, it's nothing to do with the pandemic. It's the fact that I'm here in Yorkshire. I do come down to London in normal times, and I always do like to meet people when I come. So, that's something perhaps to put into diaries for next year. Don't all bombard me at once. So I've been up here, quite a long time, and I've not been very far, which is quite frustrating, really, because one of my favourite things is going on a recce. And I love to write about places. That's a great thing. Placemaking and what makes a place is a great interest of mine. Having lived in London for as long as I've now been back up here, pretty much. Don't ask me to be precise on the maths. So I'm really aware of the differences around the country. So that's something that kind of runs through. If you want kind of like a common theme that runs through all my work, that's probably it. It's all to do with, and that's my little thing, my little saying, is how we live, where we live, and how we used to live. Because I've also got quite a good interest in heritage and in old buildings as well. But anyway, I thought it might be really helpful, and I'm really grateful to Henry for asking me to come along, because I think I probably confuse quite a lot of UPRs out there, because I don't quite know what it is that I do, because I pop up in different places. So I've tried to divide it helpfully into kind of 3 main strands, and in those strands kind of tell you the kind of things that I'm looking for. So I hope this is helpful. So for the Times and the Sunday Times, which are my newspaper outlets, if you like, I'm always looking for really good places to write about that we have not heard of. This is difficult. Believe it or not, I dropped geography before O-level. I spend more time now with a map than I ever did, because we are absolutely really keen on finding good locations where people are relocating to. We're doing this really successful series called 90s the New 60. So I'm looking for places outside of London. They're not just necessarily locations which are commutable to London, but to bigger cities like Manchester, Birmingham, Edinburgh, Bristol. So really keen on good suggestions. This is where when Zoe was talking about personality, where this comes in. Some of the nicest exchanges I think I've had with PRs while we've been doing this have been PRs who I've worked with and who I know, who've just dropped me a line and said, I heard you were looking for this particular theme. I live in Kent, and we've got this fantastic railway station, and there's all these little villages. And if the person, I'll not embarrass her, but if she's listening, you know, that actually made it into the story, and it was a really good little section in the story, was the commuter villages of Kent. So I'm really looking for places. Sometimes I know these are driven by new developments. So someone who's working really hard to promote a new development will say, we've got this fantastic new development, it's in such a place, perhaps you'd consider it. Yeah, it is sometimes a peg for it. I do think we need to manage expectations there a little bit. I won't write about it because the new development's there. I'll write about it and perhaps include the new development. So I'm always looking for exciting and interesting places to write about. I'm always looking for kind of how we live, lifestyle type stories. Now, this is where I would say one thing again, and I'm going to try and put my advice in as I go along. Please, please, please read sections, read the magazines, you know, be aware that, you know, there are only so many ideas in the world. The pandemic, I find, has given us more ideas to write about, actually, because we're all reassessing how we live and how we use a space in our house. But, you know, I don't particularly want to see emails suggesting that we do things that I've already written about, or one of my colleagues on the Times or the Sunday Times sections is already written about, because, you know, it just looks like you're not actually reading the section. Now, you know, the clever editors, clever journalists can always find a spin on a particular theme. And it's great when a PR comes to me and said, look, I know you've written about, you know, the demise of open plan living, but have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? And it is that connectivity, it's that kind of, that feeling that you're working with somebody who's actually on the same wavelength, and they're not just throwing information at you and thinking, oh yeah, they'll just tick the box because it'll fill a space. So for the Times and the Sunday Times, definitely places, interesting locations, interesting places, definitely great ideas for how we live and how we're changing the way we live. And also, I'm always really, really interested in interesting houses. Now, again, a little bit of expectation management here, because of pagination, and as you know, people will have realised for a good period, Times Bricks and Mortar in the print version has had to go into the Saturday. You know, we're online, we're really, really good online, but we don't have acres and acres of space. So sometimes it's not possible for me to pitch for me to pitch just a single house and to expect in return a page on that single house. That might have been the case in the past. And I always really used to enjoy writing those stories, particularly historical houses, fantastic new builds that were really innovative. They were great. They were lovely stories, but we can't always do that. But I am interested in those. If you send me one of those and expect me to pitch it to my editor, it does need to be an exclusive, as far as you know, as I understand what an exclusive is, which is you sent it to me first because you think it's perhaps near me up here in Yorkshire, or it's perhaps reflects some of the interests that I've perhaps written about before. But, you know, I need to know that I've got the first bite at it. And I will, you know, really try and come back to you as soon as I know. I will always try to tell you. But just to, you know, I'm really interested in that kind of property. And I got sent one yesterday, which was excellent. And it is an exclusive. And you know, it's got great pictures. Brings me on to another thing as well, before I move on to my other two sections. Pictures, 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 really important. Those of you that work with estate agents out there, the good ones will know, you know, they know about high res, they know about sending excellent long day WeTransfers or drop boxes to echo, not Google Docs. They're far too complicated. They fry my brain. There's when you're dealing with a lot of pictures, you need it to be really quick. But please, you know, no photographs with cars on, no photographs with for sale signs on. Just really nice, clear, you know, good arresting front shot images. Always will make the grade. There's so much I could say about what I do for the Times and the Sunday Times, but I'll move on to the other two strands because I'm conscious you don't want to hear me just talking. The other two strands really are the two self-build magazines that I write for, which is Grand Designs and a magazine called Self Builder and Homemaker. I'm always looking for case studies. With Grand Designs, it definitely got to be first use in a magazine. It can have been in a newspaper. We have quite a good success with houses which have been in regional magazines, for instance, or in Scottish magazines. And, you know, they've not had the UK-wide audience, but it's not a barrier really to us looking at them for grand designs. So with grand designs, it's definitely fair shoes. There is absolutely no point in sending me any case studies with pictures that have not been professionally shot. You can send me them for reference and say, we're getting professional pictures shot next week, but they've got to be really high quality and quite stylized really. If anybody wants to drop me an email or get in touch and ask me a little bit more about that, I can kind of give you a bit more detail. With Self-Builder and Homemaker, that's a very practical hands-on self-build magazine. It's aimed really at people who are getting down and dirty and doing it themselves. The exclusivity thing is not quite as paramount, but, you know, should be kind of respected really. So it is kind of like, you know, it kind of had a little bit more of a wider coverage, but again, great photographs and a good story. Again, to echo what other people have said, I will always need to know full names. I will always need to know build cost. I don't necessarily need to know land cost for self-build, but, you know, there is no point pitching any case studies to me unless people will say who they are and they'll say how much money they've spent. Because, you know, part of that, it's not so we can go, oh, that house cost this, I can't believe it. It's because other people who are reading it want to know, you know, is it in their remit? Could they do that? What could they do with that kind of money? So that's the two self-build, definitely case study driven. By the way, they don't have to be complete houses either. One thing that I have to kind of winkle out, if you like, great extensions, great renovations, great loft conversions. You know, I don't get enough of those really. And again, professional photographs, really nicely finished. So if you've got some of those, please send me them, because I'm actually working on something at the moment. I'm looking for some. And then finally, my third tranche, if you like, that is House Beautiful. And recently, during lockdown, I've been absolutely delighted. And there's been like little moments of joy in what's been a really tough year, I think, for all freelancers. And I wrote my first piece for Country Living about 3 weeks ago. And I really enjoyed writing it. It was about keeping the garden alive during autumn and winter and using it to relax, exercise, socially distantly, socialize, etc. For those, I have kind of a really nice symbiotic relationship with my House Beautiful editor, who I've known a long time. I've got a couple of editors there actually. I've known them both a long time, and we have that kind of email exchange where we've spotted something. Shall we do this? Shall we do that? We're quite chatty, but I'm always looking for interesting trends about the home, new products, but kind of feel good and nice and visual products, really. I'm always really keen to hear from interior companies, from makers, from designers that are not in London, that are doing interesting things, and just really, you know, anything that is kind of worth putting together and making a theme. And a good PR who can spot that is brilliant as far as I'm concerned, because I feel like I can work with them then. And my old news editor, who I used to work with on the Times, used to say, one is nothing, two is a coincidence, three is a story. If someone can say, there's 3 examples of this happening, you know, do you know, I'm going to bring it to your notice and I'm going to help you put a story together. And I am quite amenable to that kind of work and collaborating with the PR. The one thing I will say, and it's always a caveat, isn't there? I had a conversation, and it was very polite, with the PR last week, and he was very, very SEO driven, and he was really hammering, you know, to try and get me to actually change a story that had already gone and been printed and had appeared online, and to try to change it so to bump up his own SEO. Now, totally respect that, totally understands the SEO, but, you know, we do still have to have some limits and to remain kind of like that neutral voice, really, when we are doing property journalism, as opposed to blogging or all the other things that make up this fantastic thing that we call the media. So I would say, you know, a little bit of expectation management about SEO is good. It's good to have in your mind when you're pitching a story to me. And also the other thing, and I'm sure that everyone else who's speaking on this panel today will say this, you know, the pandemic obviously it has had an effect, but we're really busy. If we don't reply to your email straight away, we're not being rude and we're not ignoring you, and if you send an email in the morning and get my phone number and phone me in the afternoon, I'm not likely always to have had a chance to really look at that email and to take it on board and to have an answer for you straight away. And I always feel really sad because I'm quite old now, really, and I know that the junior PR execs often get the job of chasing up the journalists, and I always try to be kind, but just give us a day, give us 48 hours, and when you ring, and I've got 2 teenage children, so very soon they'll be doing their things like work experience and starting to go into the big adult world. So just a little tip. I always feel if it was my son or daughter making this phone call, how would I want them to be spoken to? But always try and get names right, and try and remember second names. I answered the phone this morning about 10 o'clock to someone who sounded frighteningly young. And I said, hello, Jayne speaking, because I always try to do that. And she went, oh, hello, Jayne speaking. Did you get my press release on XYZ? And I won't say in case she's listening. And I thought, just try and get the basics right with that kind of thing. And then everybody feels nice, and then nobody feels embarrassed, really. So in summary, I love to build relationships with PRs. I find often the best stories are working alongside and with PRs, but I just like to know that the information that I'm receiving is reliable, that it's accurate, and that we can move forward and kind of have a really good communication together. So I would like to close by saying just one thing as well, is to all PRs, whatever you're doing, please don't overpromise when I'm on deadline, because it's wonderful to think I'm getting this quote, someone's going to phone me, someone's going to send me some figures, someone's going to send me some pictures, and as the hours tick by, and if they're not coming and it hasn't arrived, it's really frustrating and it leaves a really sour taste. So if you can deliver, please deliver. If you can't deliver, just tell me, and I just think that kind of relationship then can go forward and be a good, honest, productive relationship. And thanks again. Thanks for listening. I hope that's been helpful.
That's lovely, Jayne, and a nice point about managing expectations there. I think that kind of endorses Zoe's point about transparency from PR, so that's really helpful. Clearly, you are a very kind and generous person, because I think a lot of journalists would give someone asking for SEO optimization in the words used, they would give that pretty short shrift. So I think that's decent of you to even hear them. Hugo, to you, great to have you here today, Hugo. So I think, like all our panelists, are an award-winning freelance journalist. Hugo's written on international and UK property for the Financial Times and Times since 2014. So he covers cities and second home locations around the world with a focus on the local economy. He always gets sound bites from local residents, which must take some doing. Also gets in there comment from economists, from local businesses and political figures, in addition, of course, to estate agents. Hugo, it's wonderful to have you joining the panel today. Can you give us your thoughts on how freelance journalists are adapting to this year's climate, but also at all times, what are your focus and interests, and how do you work with our audience?
Sure. Thank you, Henry. And thanks, Andrea, Zoe, Jayne. I hope I can, there's not much room to add to the comments because they've been so thorough, and some of them are echo, but I'll try not to cross my peers' tracks too much. If I just start with what is what's particularly in the sights of my editors at the FT at the moment, yeah, which I think will help people in first understanding or being a bit sort of understanding when my ridiculous requests come through. I think the main thing is to get much closer to the buying and the selling experience. Henry mentioned the inclusion of case studies, and I think this is definitely a shift there over the last year. And for you, the PRs, this requires, it's a sort of, it's not an easy ask, because often I think it means going outside of the agent network and thinking, do I know anyone myself? I'm doing a story that I've just put up on the platform about the changing architecture of the rental market in London, to try and understand how young working professionals slot in there, whether this is their chance with rents falling to move into flats that they would have managed in another generation but can't afford now. And I think that's the sort of story where you'll think about your children or children of friends, rather than going through the traditional route one of bringing around the agent network. I think also to be really clear that the majority of the UK property stories and the international property stories that I do for the FT are area led. So the way that I approach those is I try to find out which either specifically, well, pre-COVID, it was a question of finding out what specific trends in popular areas of London particularly distinguished them from others, so that we had a particular reason to cover Chelsea now or Dalston or Islington. The question is always why now? So if from your point of view of the PR community, if you sort of reverse engineer how you're thinking about your pitches and think, well, do we have access to any data that shows us curious things that distinguish one area of London from another? That might be the volume of sales of large flats as opposed to small flats, of the types of flats that are popular with sharers as opposed to those that will accommodate a single family, of houses as distinct from flats, of small houses with no gardens as distinct from large houses with large gardens. Then that'll just give a flavor of the way that into saying, well, why might Hugo be disposed to a story on this area now, other than the PR, have a development there? The other proviso there is obviously if I've just done a story on Islington, we're probably not going to have the appetite for one for another year. Generally I think that applies to the Times also. I know Jayne writes a lot on the spots to retire to and this new commuter series post-COVID, 90 is the new 30. Again, looking back on which are the areas that haven't been done and in which there's a decent supply of prime stock, nice houses you can include good photographs of, and ideally get people to speak as case studies. On the COVID impact, we're probably all trying to bash away to get to the second act of this COVID story of shifting to larger homes. It's got to be the next dimension of that story, beyond the kind of obvious areas inside and outside London that will have benefited from people going nuts in COVID and realizing that they need a bigger home. But not only where people are living and how they're living, what the impact of the end of the tourist industry has done to the feel of different areas. I think the FT are running a big piece this weekend internationally on how some city dwellers have been given their kind of neighborhoods back by now being able to have a meal in the center of Rome at a restaurant that is serving a kind of a broad Italian menu. I wonder if there's a way of looking at that in London as well. I'm keeping an eye out for that. Celebrity and at homes. Yes, on the one hand, it's a terrible time to try and persuade someone to let you into their home. On the other, they're all presumably horribly underexposed and so quite keen for the press. And there is, it's fine to do a Zoom call around someone's home as long as you can get a photographer in masked to take a couple of internal shots. And I would say that, again, those maybe junior colleagues of yours who can just sit down in a group and think, well, the FT has some reach. I'm thinking about the FT here, but also the Times has some reach here. What would be sort of pitches that they might not have thought of, but are really high profile people that we can just throw at them? So to kind of, I think it was Andrea who mentioned stories that building the relationship so that they actually pitch you stories that there's no agenda behind, but you actually think, wow, that's some really good thinking behind there. And then it shapes how I'm disposed to kind of interact with that PR and that company. There's definitely some dividends to be brought by not having an immediate win from the ideas that you're pitching, but looking at the long game about seeing that you'd be able to have a conversation down the line because you'd pitched me a couple of great stories. Yeah, echoing Zoe's point about speed, one really does start writing when you have the critical mass of what you've got enough when you can. So you might have a deadline on Friday, but you get to Tuesday and you've got 3 great interviews. Why wouldn't you write it to finish on Wednesday afternoon? So at least if you can get the kind of page holder in with me, adding to the points that Henry and Jayne meant about nothing worse than being promised something and then emailing back and not getting a reply and then having to go somewhere else. So with those 2 things sort of in mind, speed is fantastic. Just a couple of story areas and then I'll finish. I think I mentioned the falling rents in London. What are the social impacts of that? Is that now a chance for who is going to benefit from falling rents? I'd be really interested if anyone had any stories of American companies buying, or anyone in fact, building up new stock from buying homes from buy-to-let owners leaving the market. This consequence among the buy-to-let landlords of shifting from pointless now short-term lease model because no one's coming on holiday here or doing corporate relocations to long-term lets. That seems to be a big factor in driving London rents down. But some case studies of people who are actually doing that, I think is interesting. I wonder also if that's putting some commercial pressure on the co-living providers for whose tenants are now thinking, well, I can afford my own studio flat or moving in with my girlfriend. Again, I'm not expecting people with co-living developments as clients to pitch me that story, but well, actually, I mean, that would be great if they did. But anyone who's just got a lead into something like that and can just help with early research would help. Yeah, it's useful. Second homes, for those who've got clients who send them abroad into France. I'm just doing a long ski season, so I'm doing a big ski story. I mean, the question we've got to wrestle with is the second home market abroad going to survive? So start if you can start from that really skeptical point, then I think you'll get a bit more purchase when talking about second homes abroad with freelancers, especially with me, rather than coming in with unrealistic pitches about how your Cyprus development is flying off the shelves. That is it. Yeah, thanks a lot for listening, and thanks for your help and all of the replies that I get over Henry's platform. It's a really great help.
Well, thank you very much, Hugo. Just at this stage, thanks to the panel just for the level of information and advice and perspective that you've each provided. And I think there are probably so many people in the audience who already have some hot leads that they can come back to you on, which is great. I didn't necessarily expect that from this this webinar, so that's wonderful. So can I ask the panelists, if we do go on about 10 minutes extra, is that going to be all right with you?
That's fine.
Perfect, yeah.
Okay, I've got just lots of questions coming in. Okay, so a couple of generalist ones just to kind of get the questions going. In fact, we had this one on Q&A during the session from Amy at Whistle. Says, okay, I'm pitching you an exclusive by email. You know, I'm not going to hound you, I'm not going to chase you down. How long reasonably can I leave it with you for before I have a right to think, okay, that person's not interested, I'm going to try and sell it somewhere else? Any statistical answers on that one? Who would like to answer that first? Zoe, maybe?
I'd say give it a couple of days and then just a gentle nudge of, did you see the email? Because I may genuinely have just not seen the email, and it may actually really be of interest. So
2 days and a nudge, that's great. And Jayne?
Yeah, I'd say 2 days and a nudge. I'd agree with that, Zoe. And I think after a week, if you've not heard back from me, I would assume that it's probably safe to start looking at it elsewhere. And I do try to reply. So 2 days and a nudge, after a week, then try and pitch elsewhere. Okay,
and a question for Andrea and Hugh to balance things up. Lizzie Milne at Spider talks about the battle of the Outlook inbox. What is the best way, Hugo and Andrea, to stand out in your inbox? What's the best kind of subject field and first paragraph to get your attention? Andrea, would you like to answer that?
Yes, it really is an ongoing battle, and apologies to people that I don't reply to. I just spend my whole day just replying to emails. So sometimes if it's just a general, sorry, I'm not answering the question, but if someone sends me a release or it's not directly related to what I'm doing or usually do, and then they phone and they email straight away saying, have you seen this, or here it is again, that can be quite annoying sometimes. Just is, but just keep it short, keep it brief. Yeah, do a follow-up, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. And make sure it is they've seen my features and they know what I do, so they know it is something I will potentially be interested in.
Yeah. Hugo, any thoughts on email style and indeed avoid?
Just read my stories, as Andrea said, so you know what I'm interested in and what I cover. That's a big turn off if someone hasn't done that. And I think just let's face it, if you can't tell the story in 2 lines or 3 lines, it's probably not there. And so really commit to what you think is the story in your pitch, and that will, I think, result in you pitching me much less.
Yeah, that's very good. I wonder if sometimes PR agencies issue press releases that have gone through a 5-tier sign-off process, and the opening sentence to you is actually their chance to put their own spin on it, which may just be that little bit stronger.
Yeah,
okay.
It's good. I appreciate that it's so much easier said than done, because your client has what he or she wants to communicate in the press release. I am sympathetic to that, but maybe just try and bury it in paragraph 2.
Yeah.
Can I just add something very quickly?
Please, Andrea.
To that. Can I just say, if you're sending me a case study, it would be really helpful to have in the subject box, whether it's help to buy, shared ownership, just to give me an indication, because I file them like that, and that's what's generally required. So if you could do that, that would be immensely helpful. Thank you.
Very good. Question from Gemma Watts, Associate Director at CBRE. She asks, what angles are you and your editors looking for at the moment in terms of new homes? And I've got one other new home story, but I think, Andrea, I'm going to ask you to answer that.
We do, I mean, as well as sort of general coverage for first-time buyers, second steppers, do a lot of themes. So actually, if you have ideas for themes, that would be really good, and you can send me a couple of developments that fit those themes, and that would be great.
Okay, themed ideas, and as I think was mentioned, three proves the trend, doesn't it? Does that often help if you can give 3 case studies?
Yes.
Very good. And Jayne, what are your thoughts on the new homes market at the moment?
New homes, I'll tell you what I'm looking for. It's 2 quite specific things, actually. I'm really interested in looking for new homes that have got really good eco features. because I've actually been out, been to 2 developments in the past fortnight. One, absolutely no eco features. I was really surprised. Just a standard gas boiler, etc. The other, all the bells and whistles. So eco features for me, and really good use of space. So, you know, the developers who were totally ahead of the curve, bearing in mind, obviously, that, you know, these houses may have started being built last year. The ones who are incorporating clever things like work from home space, you know, flexible bedroom space and that kind of thing.
Okay. I've got a question from Lottie Crossley at Hayfield Homes, who points out that there's been huge demand this year caused by the significant drop in the number of new home completions. That's what Hayfield Homes has seen. But she goes on to say, are there any circumstances in which you would be willing to visit a new housing development at the moment? Maybe Jayne could answer that first, and then Andrea.
Yeah, I'm totally happy to go if it's doable, and, you know, as long as it's safe. As always, I've been to 2 in the past fortnight. And
Andrea?
Yes, I've been to 2 or 3. Yeah, very happy to. If it's in central London, though, it would be really handy if you'd send a cab, because I'd rather not get public transport if I didn't have to.
Absolutely right. And Hugo mentioned internationally virtual tours. For Jayne and Andrea, does that work sometimes to get a virtual tour to help you?
I think a virtual tour is good if it's far away from me. I mean, bearing in mind that I live in Yorkshire, and, you know, time is money. And I'm not going to start a north-south debate on this panel or in the wider community of everyone who's listening, but some people do need to look at the map before they, you know, assume that just because it's in the north, it's in my bit of the north. You know, the north is quite a big place, really. I'd be interested in virtual. One point can I just very quickly make, and I should have made it before, is the question of CGIs. I know CGIs are really helpful for developers and for PRs. It is very, very rare that I ever write a story where my editor will actually use the CGI. And that includes the self-build titles that I work for. I really have to twist her arm, actually, and it is so rare. So, you know, CGIs are good for reference. They're useful along with anything really that's virtual. But, you know, again, managing them, the expectations, we very rarely use them in publication.
Okay. Couple on the international front, maybe especially for Zoe and Hugo. Vicky Goddell at P1 Communications says, what overseas property topics and regions are hot right now? And Laura Westmancott, the Managing Director of Mercury Communications, says, how do PRs go about creating an engaging international property story right now when journalists aren't traveling? And are you open to virtual video tours, which I think Hugo has partly answered. But if I could have each of your thoughts on that, Zoe, maybe you could answer those questions first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's sort of what Hugo said about, you know, why now, why this, why now? You know, it's not a case that there's anywhere that's hot to write about at the moment, particularly. It's always just finding that really interesting angle that makes you want to write about it. So, you know, I can't sort of say, well, right now everyone's going to want pieces about Spain. I mean, no one really wants anything about anywhere specifically because no one's going anywhere. So yeah, there just has to be a really good reason why, you know, you'd focus on the place, and it can't be disingenuous. As Hugo said, you can't sort of just pretend that a market is just doing phenomenally well because everyone knows all the obstacles at the moment. And you know, it could be, there's all these sort of, I don't know, various incentives in various countries, aren't there, like citizenship schemes and all sorts of things that are happening with those at the moment. You know, it could be things like that, new information about those schemes that's interesting in some way, that shows that people are suddenly focusing on a certain destination for some reason. Yeah, I wouldn't say anywhere's particularly hot. It's just having that genuine angle that's not just, here's a really pretty development.
Okay, and Hugo.
Yeah, I would just say, Vicky, Laura, that there's a sort of opportunity that's offered now at the Financial Times that is maybe different to how you've been thinking about it before. And that's that, remember that Financial Times readers are, many of them, if we do a story about Barcelona or San Francisco, many of the readers will live in Barcelona or have lived in Barcelona or be planning a work move to Barcelona or considering it through their employer. So you almost want to think about these international pitches as pitches to a Spanish newspaper or an American newspaper, because that's the market we're tending to address, except not in the case with an Alpine property section, for example, but generally people whose primary home is in this area, or if it's a secondary home location in the US, for example, or in the Middle East or in the Far East, people whose primary home is the adjacent city or the adjacent city state. So kind of step back, for example, if you're thinking about France, and ask the question, where are people who are leaving Paris in the same way that people are leaving London and going to the Cotswolds? Where are they thinking about buying, and where are they buying? And can my client's development fit into that trend? Then if you kind of put a different hat on, then I think it could be a really good time to pitch these stories.
Okay. And are you partly writing on international as if there isn't, he dares to say this, as if there is an end to COVID and international property is a long-term investment? Are you writing on that basis, Hugo?
As for primary homes, given the distinction I've just made, 100% absolutely. So New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Hong Kong, Paris, Frankfurt, how are these markets, how are the country, the people whose homes are made in these cities, how are they responding to COVID? For second homes, my sense, you will know better than me, but my sense is that this is a discretionary purchase, which is the first thing that is likely to be put on hold or has been put on hold. If you can demonstrate that there are exceptions to that rule, then I think editors will be looking at this before the COVID question and discretionary spending question is resolved. Otherwise, I think it's a short term.
Very helpful. And Zoe, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my immediate reaction was, I mean, anyone who's buying second homes, it's clearly a very luxurious thing to be doing at the moment. So it's going to be that sort of very wealthy tier of people. You hear lots about how people are buying them and plan to spend much longer periods of time in them. So, there does seem to be some activity that you can pinpoint and focus on, whether it's the Algarve or sort of, wherever else at the moment. But it is really trying to eke out what's a genuine story, who really is. I don't know anyone that's buying a second home at the moment, so who really is.
Very good. A very quick final international one, and then I'm going to get back to some UK matters. So again, Zoe and Hugo. Dominic Carroll, head of PR at England Vocals, joining us from the Balearic Islands, asks, are you open to joining virtual press conferences where they put their regional specialists forward and talk about their markets? Does that appeal to you, Zoe?
Yeah, I think so. I'm in the absence of being able to travel anywhere right now. Yes, I think so. As I say, I'm very open to all the sort of stimulus that can come in, really, from while I'm sitting here. So yeah.
Yeah, good. And Hugo?
Yeah, exactly. I would love to spend an hour with England Volker's experts in 5 different countries, all giving me 10 minutes on what was happening in those markets, in those key city markets and the key second home location markets. That's a huge amount of work for me saved.
Yeah, it's true. It's a really valuable way of getting a lot of information quickly, isn't it?
If you could get them together. If I had to spend an hour just listening to Paris, I could probably do it better myself, just in half an hour on Google.
Dominic, I think you got your answer there. Hannah Elwell, Deputy MD at Unsworth Sugden, asks, and this is maybe one for Jayne and Andrea, case studies and pseudonyms. She's finding, for their many clients in new homes, they're having to offer pseudonyms. They can't get the real names, and clients are cracking down. Is that a deal breaker for you, Jayne?
Yeah, I'll be honest, probably yes.
Okay.
It may not be for other publications, but all of the publications that I write for they really do need to be, there's a distinction here. If it's been portrayed as a case study, where there's a great deal of detail and I'm using direct quotes, then really, and it's not a terribly controversial subject. You know, it might be their first time buyers or their downsizers. If there's no real absolute justification for a pseudonym, then I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. If it was perhaps a controversial story where using the real name may damage a case or something like that, then that I would decide on an individual basis, and I would obviously consult with whoever was commissioning me as well, and where we'd talk about it in detail. But I think as a general rule, I'm quite wary of them, to be honest. If I'm using them as direct quotes, I need the real person. If it's a background and I can say a buyer or, you know, someone who's just moved in and just use it in general terms, then obviously the name doesn't count. But as a rule, I do prefer that real, and I need the real names. Yeah.
And Andrea, any thoughts on that, on pseudonyms and also not giving away ages? Does that make things?
No, I'll keep it quick. No, pseudonyms generally no problem as long as I have a surname. Prefer ages if possible, though I can say 20 something. Also, I prefer, we need a job, doesn't have to be specific, can be works in the financial industry, but we do need some indication of what they do.
Very good. Okay, so 2 more questions and we'll wrap. I've got Asil, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Asil Haddad at Building Relations says, I'm finding my best pitches aren't necessarily by sending press releases. Does the panel just, are you open to just emails that pitches an angle supported by quotes and maybe data? Is that fine?
100%.
100% for Hugo?
That's my preference.
Yeah.
It's been my preference as well, because I think what I like, and it sometimes is a holy grail, is to feel that the PR's actually engaged with the story, understood the story, processed the story, looked around, seen how that story might have kind of been covered, but in a slightly different way. Often the best stories are those hunch stories, you know, those a PR who is absolutely, you know, day in, day out working with a property client, and they've noticed something or they picked up on something, and they might have picked up on that before me, and then I'm pleased. I find it's kind of much more intuitive.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, it's them having seen the stories themselves rather than being sort of manufactured and sort of contrived. It's just genuine observation.
It just relates, echoing Andrea's point right at the beginning, which is that if you can think away from your immediate client brief and towards just getting a relationship established with the freelancer from pitching them good stories, in the long run, I think you'll do better.
Very good. I'm trying to choose the last question here. I'll end with Harriet Ball at Building Relations. How are you finding keeping in touch with PRs during lockdown? So you haven't been meeting them at industry events, at conferences, at launches and so forth. Do you find that, I think she's saying, you know, do you find that your relations with PRs have strengthened during this year? Or has it become a little bit more difficult to pull your stories together? Let's finish with that. And any final words of wisdom? So maybe Jayne, can you take that question first?
Well, where I am geographically, I don't get to meet PRs as much as the other members of the panel do. I think my relationships with the good PRs have strengthened because they've helped me a lot. When I've been turning around stories quite quickly at the beginning of lockdown for the Daily as well, working alongside staff colleagues, and the good PRs have really, really, really proved their worth. And if they're listening, they know who they are.
Zoe, how have the PR relationships been for you this year?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I don't rely on meeting them in person either. I think you can get as much from emails, phone calls, and in a way it was reassuring when everything picked up again, you know, when the property market started again, the section started to re-emerge for freelancers. It was actually reassuring how active all the PRs were. They were suddenly all there, even though they're all sitting in their own homes. You know, they were absolutely as active as ever and ready to sort of, you know, get back quickly. So no, I haven't had any problem at all.
Andrea, have PRs been helpful this year?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yes, and I think it was Hugo who said actually some of the relationships with ones I deal with a lot of strengthen. PRs tend to be picking up the phone more. Maybe they want that sort of human contact when working from home rather than in an office. There's just the occasional one who perhaps I don't deal with so often, and some people are just that little bit more difficult to get hold of. But generally, yes, and Property4Media obviously helps enormously. So thanks, Henry, to you and your team.
Well, thanks for saying that. It's very, very kind of you. Hugo, your final thoughts?
Yeah, very, very responsive in the weeks following the lockdown, when we're all searching around for stories to pitch to editors who didn't want them. But yeah, really kind of I felt like it pushed PRs to look quite forensic detail at what was happening, which is a great discipline that really helped me.
So thumbs up from our panel for all you PRs out there. You're doing a great job by the sense of it. It's been a wonderful webinar today. Thank you so much to our panel. I just think the level of insights and kind of tips and useful steers for property PR professionals has probably been the best that we've seen in any of these webinars today. So thank you so much to our wonderful panelists, Andrea Dean, to Hugo Cox, to Jayne Dowle, and to Zoe Darehall. Thanks to everyone for joining us, and we will see you the very next time. Bye then.
Thanks, everyone.
Great to see you.
Bye.